Well, I've been fighting Bank of America for over 8 years now. It has been one of the most horrendous obstacles I've ever run into. They're such a big company and they have so many different affiliates. It's almost impossible. I'm not an attorney, I'm not an expert, but I've been following this and fighting them, and I've lost one property. I had initially five properties that had loans with Countrywide Home Loans that went from 2002 to 2009. And I was busy with my 95-year-old mom taking care of her, which cost us almost $1.3 million. So I was so busy, I didn't pay attention like I should have. With all that was going on with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citi, Chase Bank, they were all into this, and even our own government, as I've dug in deeper with Fannie Mae and with Freddie Mac, with GSE, with FHFA. They're all in this together in a huge Ponzi scheme. Once they started securitizing loans with the stock market, letting them in when Glass-Steagall was dumped, then that was an act that Bill Clinton had decided he didn't want any longer. So when they dumped that, why they started securitizing, packaging these loans, selling them to investors. So guys like me would not understand all that. When you write a loan with somebody, you sign some documents and you have a loan. They give you the money. In this case, my loans were I never met the lender. They were all table funded from what I understand. The money did not come from Countrywide. The money came from investors, and the money was supposed to be pooled and put into trust. But that never happened according to all the research I've done. I mean, there's billions of dollars that have been spent by Bank of America and by the public fighting back and forth because of what's been done by Bank of America. Bank of America supposedly took over Countrywide Home Loans in 2008. So at that point, they started harassing me, telling me they were the servicer of my loan. They were just servicing it, but we didn't know who owned the loan. Supposedly Fannie Mae was supposed to own the loan, but Fannie Mae does not own loans. Fannie Mae only guarantees loans for the government. So it's always investors who are putting up the money that invest in Fannie Mae stocks and all. And so that money goes back and forth with the banks. So we don't know how many times our loan was sold. They created a company called MERS, MERS, Mortgage Electronic Recording Incorporated. And that was actually set up by the banks and all, so they could circumvent having to go and record all these loans and all these steps with every recorder wherever business was done. So that saved them, probably billions of dollars. We'll say millions of dollars. But there was no actual records then. It all was supposedly on this thing, MERS, and they used MERS, who was supposed to be a beneficiary and a nominee, to act on behalf of Bank of America. So when they did foreclosures and all, it was done by MERS. But in many states, MERS has been proven to be a fake. It's not a legitimate company. They didn't have employees. So when I got all these notices from Bank of America, they were done by another company that they hired called Urban Settlement Services that did all kinds of phony modifications. So when you purported to try to get a loan modification from Bank of America, you were actually dealing with somebody in Colorado or Texas or Florida, and they were people that were hired at $10 an hour to just prolong making you turn in paperwork thinking you were getting a modification. And the modification was supposed to be by the government, where you would get a 2% loan, and they would recast the loan and make your payments much lower. But Bank of America did phony modifications through a company they created called Urban Settlement Services, and there is a big lawsuit now that was just approved at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Colorado. It's George et al. Versus Urban Settlement Services, and Bank of America. And that case has to do with racketeering and exactly what they did to me on my 5 loans. So what they did phony modifications, said, we will modify your loan. But this took me 3 years to get them to do that, and paperwork about 3 feet high, and submitting over 1,100 documents to Texas, then to Florida. They passed you around. So then finally they said, our modification is going to keep your interest rate at the same percent. We're doing an in-house modification, not a HEMP, because you don't qualify. That's what they would say. So then they would do the in-house modification. They would keep the interest rate high at your 7 or 8% like I had, and then they would extend the loan out 50 years or more, and that's how they would lower it just a little bit, but then they would add on all these late fees and stuff because they told you not to make payments for a while, before you would be eligible. So if you really want to if people really want to know how this works and all, they need to read that 10th Circuit Court case, it's a appeals court ruling on racketeering. And another very important case is the Morrow, Morrow case versus Bank of America. And you can easily get these by going on the internet. You go on the internet, click on Morrow versus Bank of America. You can go down, you can read several opinions on it and all. And basically, they ruled against Bank of America for the same thing they're doing to me, for the same thing they've done to millions of people. So in the long term, I'm pissed at Bank of America because they have stolen property from millions of people, at least a few million. And all the bank money that Bank of America got initially on the bailout, $45 billion, they were supposed to help homeowners. They took that money and used it for other things. They did not follow the HEMP program and help all of the property owners. They use it to invest and to harass, and they spent billions in lawsuits defending themselves because they had fines, they had penalties, and they lost all these lawsuits. So their famous thing to do after they lost the lawsuit, if they saw they were going to be forced to go to a jury trial, they would settle, then they would seal the case. It would be a confidential case so that other attorneys couldn't pull from those cases to use against them. They were clever. But if you go into the Montana case and read what Lori McKinnon, Chief Justice, had to say about Bank of America, that will really open your eyes. I mean, she really pasted Bank of America good on exactly what they were doing, how bad it was, how ill-prepared they were to help people, and all the scamming they did. Then if you really want to know about what's happened in all of this, you want to read David Dayen's book, which is called Chain of Title. It's an excellent book, and it goes through from 3 people fighting Bank of America, fighting Chase, and exposing all this stuff, being threatened by these people, being sued by these people. They were devious in anything they could do to try to cover all of this up. And whenever you go and try to seek help from the government, like the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, that's a complete farce. When Richard Condrey was the head of that, they did hardly anything. They would do just enough to make it look like they were doing something. But they had thousands of complaints by Bank of America and everybody else, and they really didn't do much about it. So then, after the bailouts, they did the national mortgage settlement with 50 states, where they agreed with the lenders that they hadn't followed through with the bailouts they got. So they got sued in this national mortgage settlement by the 50 states, and they settled on, I think it was about $22 billion, and they were supposed to use the $22 billion to bail out the homeowners and do what they were supposed to do originally with the $45 billion, and they didn't do that. So then the Department of Justice in 2016 sued them again. They sued Bank of America specifically for almost $17 billion. And they were supposed to use that money then to bail out homeowners and help them. They didn't do that. They had an attorney named Green who didn't do anything. He didn't even know what was happening. and if you tried to contact him, you just got stonewalled, you know. And it was the same thing if you tried to get a hold of Fannie Mae to see if they really had your loans. They would talk to you. Well, they give you a number, and then they'd never get back to you. So it was just always a constant, you know, dodging, ducking, jiving, and avoiding, and doing anything they could to force people into foreclosures where they could get the money back because they would sell the properties once they got them back. But the main thing was they buried that bad loan, you know, because all these loans that were originated by, you know, in my case, Countrywide and all. And that's another thing with Countrywide Home Loans. There's statements on record, depositions where they say most of their loans were destroyed after they were made. So there's no record of it. And I've fought Bank of America. I've asked for documents. I've been intimidated by big law firms like Blank and Rome and Janeway Law in Denver, who got fined $650,000 for their fraudulent activity and handling foreclosures for Bank of America and all. So, like I say, they were fined 650,000 plus 350 on hold to make them comply, and they're still pulling the same thing. And I'm told that Janeway Law Firm is backed by a big law firm in Florida. We know that in Florida there was a big firm, David Stern Law Firm, that made billions, you know, representing the banks, fabricating and making phony loan documents and sending them out to make people think that they had documents when they didn't. I've already proved, I have a stack here of all the documents that are phony. You can see they're stamped, they're forged, they're robo-signed, meaning they're signed by phony people or signed by people that just go in there for $10 an hour and they stamp these documents and do things. So there's just, it's a massive mess that's been going on. It really went on when they started initially discovering this, you know, when the financial thing, even before the financial crisis in 2008. And in 2009, when I was putting out over $100,000 to take care of my mom, I finally decided I'm going to need more money. I'm going to need these modifications, and that's when I got involved. So, like I say, I've been fighting it ever since. They've been stalling me. They won't do anything. They won't even respond to me, other than with attorneys saying, "Well, we've already responded. We're not going to do anything else." They've sent these. They were stupid enough to send these phony documents that I have that I can show people. You know, you can easily see that they're not really valid documents with nice written signatures and dates. They don't have any of that, you know. So you can prove that, but when you go to the court system only accepts facial evidence. They only want to see what the bank has, and so the bank says, "Well, this is an original, Your Honor," and they submit it. Well, you can't even tell if it's an original. It's a copy, it looks like. And so they take their evidence. But when you want to submit evidence, no, you can't submit evidence. And so based on that facial evidence, they rule, okay, you can do the foreclosure. But they don't prove that it's an original document. In our jurisprudence system, they're supposed to prove anything they supply to the courts. And they don't do that. They don't have any money trail. They don't have any transfer trail. There's no chain of title. That's why the big thing now is they're having big companies that do chain of title legally, and they can prove that there's a break in the chain, that they didn't do what they said they did. So this is the biggest problem that I can see now, is that the government really needs to step into this and take an active role again, because they're still doing the same thing. What gets me today is they're making loans again. They're securing these loans. They're selling these loans. So we're back to the same old thing, in my opinion, that caused this in the first place. And to me, that's going to result in a disaster, and it's going to hurt the American people, because this whole thing is a big circle of our money that's being used. We got the investors that put the money in, and we take the money as a loan, and then when we can't make payments or financial hard times hit us, then they say, well, we're going to take your property back, and then they can't prove who is going to take the property. So they bury the federal government has also had several big lawsuits with people. The federal government has sued the banks. There's a $13 million lawsuit against Ceteris. That's another lender that's Bank of America used Ceteris, Shell Point as servicers. They transferred some of these loans to them to take the heat off of them because they have so many lawsuits and all. And when you go in on the internet and look at Ceteris, they have 1 star and they're rated terrible. And you go in with Shell Point, the same thing. They're all what I call phony servicers, and they're trying to take your money or trying to force you into foreclosure so they can, get that property back and sell it and bury that old loan, and then they've got that money again. So all this money just keeps going back to them. The government, where did all this money go? That's my question. All these billions that were allocated to these lenders to help buy and help these people like me, get back on their feet. Where is all that money? I mean, we're talking billions. And Bank of America alone has spent over $150 billion, as I read on the internet, in lawsuits and in fines and penalties, like I said before. So that's my complaint against them and my fight against them. And I'm going to continue to fight. I'm not going to get anywhere because I'm sure the new regime is going to stick with the government bureaucracies, although Mick Mulvaney has now supposedly taken over the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So hopefully that's going to be run a little better. And maybe if Dr. Ben Carson is a really good, honest guy like we hope he is, maybe he can get in. He's already discovered all kinds of fraud and abuse with HUD, which is part of FHFA. So, I mean, we all know that the government is full of fraud and waste. I mean, I was in Vietnam as a veteran. I'm a veteran now, but when I was there were millions wasted of money over there in a war that should have never happened. But that's a whole nother story. So, but the main thing is the government is the one that you have to hope can help you, but they're not. So what does a person do? You're forced to go to pay high lawyers, and then you can win your case. The whole trend now lately has turned around, and if you go to people like Neil Garfield, who's an attorney in Florida, he has a website called Living Lies, and that gives you a lot of insight into his fight that was back when he was doing all the cases, and now his help in helping people, because this is all resurfaced again, because there was a lot of foreclosures that they just buried and didn't do anything with for a while, because if they'd have done it all at one time, it would have been so overwhelming, our financial system probably would have collapsed. I had 5 properties I got loans on between 2002 and 2009, our new home, and they managed to get one from me with a complete robo-signer, and her name is Michelle Solinger, and that was signed in blank and all. It was done by Janeway. I've only lost 1 property so far to foreclosure, and that was really a family property. I used my name, and the lender allowed me to do that to get the loan. It was really not my property, but my own properties, no, I have them all intact. I've had to pay thousands to bring the loans current when I found out they lied to me, and I got lucky and sold some other property. So I'm hanging in there, and I haven't had anything foreclosed on other than that 1 family property. They added on all kinds of fees then, because they told you not to make payments before you could get the modification, which was false. And so then when they did the modification, it's called in-house modification, because it was done supposedly by them, but it was done by Urban Settlement Services Incorporated as attorney in fact for Bank of America when they sent you the documents, and those documents never got recorded. And that makes sense because they were fabricated, they were phony. So there was no way they could record those modifications. But they say I have modifications, and I've been making payments based on the phony modifications, but it's still at the same high interest rate with all that added money on, and then extended out, like you said, highway theft to 50, 60 years. Most of the time you can. They used to say you couldn't, but the government finally said, and this was supposedly through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are, that's a whole nother story. But they supposedly said that you could go to anybody and you could refinance. The problem with me, they destroyed my credit. I used to have credit that was almost 800 before I got involved in this fight. So now my credit went down when I started the fight to 400 or 500. I've got it back up to 650, 670 now, working hard at it because I know how to work it, and make it better. But still, it's not quite high enough for me. As a veteran, you have to have a credit score of 700 or better, and you have to have the cash flow to support it, although Fannie Mae says you really don't have to show all that. They're saying all you have to do is apply, and the lender is supposed to give you a loan and not go through all this paperwork and all. But I haven't found that to be true. I've been turned down by most of the lenders because of my credit score is not quite there, and because my cash flow, now that I'm a retired, man, I don't make the money I used to. So I've had trouble trying to refinance, but people are supposed to be able to easily refinance now, and that's not been the case from what I've heard from a lot of people, and they're in the same boat I am, because that was one of the things is when you went through this HEMP program and all, they were supposed to wipe your credit clean and help you. See, the whole thing is, if they were really in this to help a person, they would be doing the money to you, and the new money at a lower rate to help you, and then they would erase a bunch of the credit because they know what you'd been through, and they'd take away a lot of those dings. And I have one ding on my credit report with Shell Point Mortgage, and when they say I owe them $20,000, I sold that property. I paid it off. I made $50,000 when I should have made $100,000 because I had to sell it quickly before they would foreclose. They were threatening me. So in that case, that was another one with Shell Point Mortgage, and that's all on my credit report, and that dings my credit down. I have sent numerous letters to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I've sent complaints to Fannie Mae. I've asked for them to specify, prove that they own the loans, which they don't. And when I get these letters here, it just says, well, we'll get back to you. They give me a number, and they never get back to me. I've contacted the Department of Justice. I've sent countless letters. I've sent those letters, return receipt. I've sent letters to Bank of America and to Ceteris and all, but they just stonewall me. I have a big stack of all the correspondence I've sent. I bombard them all the time. I've been corresponding on the internet, supposedly with the Trump Foundation. I asked them for help. I asked President Trump himself. I've sent letters. I've sent letters to the Attorney General again. I did that, when Loretta Lynch was there, and of course nothing was happening because that was probably the worst segment ever, with those people. And now I don't know if it's much better because I've sent information. I've sent proof. What more can you do? I mean, other than if I had money, I'd hire an attorney and beat them like the Morrows did, like the Georges are going to do. And that's the other thing I would stress to people. Be careful about joining a class action suit because you're not going to get much. The attorneys are going to make millions, but you're going to get pennies. That's what it results in when you finally come down to it in the end. Because all these attorneys, they're in it to make nothing but money, whichever side they're on. They're making billions, representing the phony lenders, and then they're making billions representing the poor people that were really injured and hurt on this, and the lies that they lay out and the things they do. A lot of these law firms, like, the big law firm I told you about, Stern in Florida, he had paper mills. That's places where they fabricated and forged and made all the documents for the lenders so that they could send those out to the courts and all to prove their cases. And he got caught. He was making all this money, and he got caught. He's no more. They wiped him out. I found it on the internet. I was doing a lot of research on the internet, and I was telling my story to anybody that would listen. I would reach out to anybody that I could that I thought might be able to help, or anybody that I could, get on my side who would present the story to all these people so they would know. There's so many innocent people. I feel terrible for people that got pushed out of their homes that don't have the education that I have and the little bit of money that I have to fight. I mean, they got pushed out. That they were, bullied and pushed out, and they lost everything they had, and it should have never been that way. Should have never happened, in my opinion. I'm willing to help people as much as I can, but like I say, I'm not the expert. I mean, Living Lies is one of the main blogs that's really pushing to help people across the country, Neil Garfield. And everybody should have required reading of Chain of Title so they understand a little bit about how this works, and then they can pursue people like you, Consumer Financial Protection Agency, if it gets turned around and can really help people. I see it as a big phony, inept government organization right now. And then reach out to attorneys that are willing to help, reach out to your state. There are states that are corrupt too. I don't know if you knew that, but Jerry Brown stole $300 million of that bailout money at that national mortgage settlement, where all the states would get so much money to help homeowners. He took all that money to help pay debts of California, but he got caught. So that's on the internet too. That'll show you how some of the states are corrupt too, just as much as the federal government. I just refer him as a great resource because he's been a tremendous help to me. I follow that. He puts out blogs every day, and you can go in there and learn so much because he's got a network of attorneys. They've got the consumer fraud company now. There's one forensic consumer fraud where you can hire them or pay them, and they'll do chain of title searches for you and prove, that the lender doesn't own your loan. That a lot of these cases, they don't know where the loan is. It's just scratched on paper somewhere as far as they can tell, And I never wanted to get out of my loans. I just wanted to have a fair shake and have my loans fairly modified the way they should have been, truly modified and not in-house phony modifications. And then, once I started pursuing all this, finding out just how crooked it was and how inept they were and how they just push you to try to get you to foreclose or give up, and not fight them.